Fantastic. Good day, everybody, and welcome to the EU Cannabis Market Study webinar. Apologies for any delays in the programs. We were just finalizing a few details from our side. Wesgro has a mandate to grow exports from the Western Cape. One of the functions that the Wesgro provides is sharing of market information. This webinar is in response to industry requests to Wesgro for information related to the EU market. While we are well aware that there are still many challenges related to the cannabis commercialization in South Africa, this webinar is not intended to deal directly with these challenges, but is simply in response to requests for information about export markets and about understanding how to find off-takers. Additionally, because obtaining off-take agreements are a key part of getting a license to cultivate medicinal cannabis, finding buyers and understanding export markets is a process that you need to go through almost in inception of your business and your model. So there was just a quick precursor to the climate and background to why we're actually doing this webinar, and as well as the study that was done on this webinar itself. And before I begin, just so that there's not many repeats for back and forth between the different panelists and as well as presenters, I just wanted to give a very brief overview of Wesgro. And Wesgro is the official tourism, trade and investment promotion agency for the Western Cape and Western Cape and the city of Cape Town. Some of the key caveats to Wesgro and service delivery is obviously investment attraction and facilitation, trade promotion and facilitation, tourism promotion, marketing and communications, research and analytics, advocacy and advisory, and as well as our special initiatives such as Air Access and Cruise Cape Town. So we actually operate at all caveats of the Western Cape economy and how to stem and foster businesses linkages between the public and private industries. There have been a few changes to the program, and obviously our biggest and highlight and main event is the EU Market Access Report, which will be presented by Prohibition Partners, Mr. Stephen Murphy. And with that as well, a great welcome to our EU Delegation Economic and Trade Advisor, Mr. Engel, who will also just give us a few words from his side, and they've helped fund the study, and as well as looking forward to Cannabis Europa in June, which Wesgro will be attending with two other provincial agencies as well. I will be the main prompter, the master of ceremonies, and then from there we'll just welcome through the EU delegation to South Africa, the economic trade advisor, for a few words. We'll then move over to Prohibition Partners, who will present the presentation, and then we just take a key response, because this will be export focused, from our head of export promotion unit, Ms. Erica Yobert. And then finally, we'd like to just be a bit more dynamic in our panel discussion and how we answer Q&A. And we've got quite a good host of panelists today, which include obviously Prohibition Partners, Biodelts, Mr. Leon Gieser. Our panel host will be Ms. Karen Bosman, Strategic Advisor at Wesgro. And as well as we'll welcome again Ms. Erica Yobert as head of our export unit, and then our Wesgro Health Tech head of that desk, which will be Ms. Mandi Swanepoel. I will then follow up with the closing remarks and then prompt each panelist just to come and share what they have here to say today. So without further ado, thank you very much. This is being recorded and we'll share all details with you after the call or after the webinar. From here, welcome to the EU delegation to South Africa. I'll ask Mr. Engel, please join us here for 5 minutes. We'd love to hear from you and just words from the EU Commission itself. Thank you very much. So you can just put your camera and unmute, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joshua, and thank you to the organization for the organization of this seminar. Thank you also all the participants, because I think there are a lot of attendees waiting for this vibrant seminar. If someone wonders from where we are coming with this study, I would say that this a long trip that started 6 years, more or less 6 years ago, when the EPA, the Economic Partnership Agreement, was signed between the EU and the 6 of the southern countries of Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, and of course South Africa. And this is very important because in the case of a small country as Lesotho, The IPA has also gave an opportunity to have as a sexy story with export or exporting cannabis to the EU. From a point of view, further the figures and trade and investment that of course they are there, and they show how important is our relationship under the IPA. And of course, we are living in 2021 for the first time in the story, and surplus from the side of the exports of South Africa. I would like just to say that the IPA is also a framework for predictability, a framework where the companies can go ahead in the both of the side with a certainty in the framework of the relationships, and this is very important. And this is a way just to improve the regional and global value chains. And this is the reason because, in fact, the EU was commissioned some works in the framework of the value chain, especially in the conducting some technical reports and studies and advocacy actions, what is the case of today. In the case of the cannabis, there is an improving industry in South Africa, but limited sometimes for the regulation here. But now the regulations are getting more flexible, and it's the same case as in Europe. And this is, of course, an opportunity now for I think I would say a window open for some opportunities, especially medical cannabis. And in the side of the EU, we are living a review process now in this stage, how a market can be more and more open. I think Stefan is going to explain more on that. So this is an opportunity for these companies, for these producers that are able just to meet with the US standards. And sometimes this is very difficult for the small and medium enterprises of South Africa to get this information, to know how to access to the market, to know how to establish network with the EU side. This is the reason also because the EU commissioned this study that was conducted by Stefan, and we had the pleasure just to have the results of this study. Finally, the only thing is just to get access to the companies, to this information in regulations, to put the consumers, the producers, and also the industry in contact. And this is one of the activities we are going to do, but it will be more activities in the next future to improve this network. So welcome to everybody, and thank you, Joshua, for these minutes.
Truly appreciate your words, and especially on, definitely building and fostering those business linkages, networks, and how we can continue relationship moving forward and really grow the South African cannabis industry just into future heights. Thank you very much. From here, I'd like to welcome Mr. Murphy from Prohibition Partners. This is probably the main content of the session, and there's such a well-structured, beautiful market research report for the EU on medical cannabis has been given. And I think definitely pay the most attention to this. And also we welcome so many questions. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so please put through onto our Q&A, onto our chat. We definitely love to answer these questions and see how we can pose this to our panelists later on in this discussion. So Mr. Murphy, please put on your camera, unmute, put up your presentation. I'll give you indication once the presentation is up, and we're really looking forward to your content. Thank you, sir.
Perfect.
Presentation is up.
Perfect. Right. Hello. Hi, everybody. So I am. My name is Stephen Murphy. I am co-founder and CEO of a company called Prohibition Partners. I've first started in cannabis 7 years ago. What we started doing originally was when we first started kind of uncovering and discovering what was happening in the industry, there's less than 10 countries around the world with some sort of federal legalization program, not an access program, but a legalization where there's potential of patient access. Today, there's over 60, and what we try and attempt to do is to cover regulatory, commercial, political, social, and kind of and business updates that is happening in each of those markets, and kind of forecast how the market is going to evolve. We work across medical, CBD, and adult use, anywhere where cannabis is used as an entity. I have also, as an entrepreneur in the space, been involved in building companies across the supply chain. So that's everything from distribution, manufacturing, telemedicines, clinics, doctor education, and then kind of brands. So brands both from over the counter in the CBD space, but predominantly more so within the medical environment. I, as you know, as in this forum, what I want to kind of talk you through today, and I think, look, I've got around 30 minutes, but I can certainly spend more, and I want to kind of be able to answer everybody's question, and for you to get as much use out of this, but to talk you through what is happening more so in Europe, where the gaps in the European market are going to be, and talk you through kind of some of the routes to market. So we cover global markets and have done since 2017. There's a reason why I'm so excited about Europe. Is you're starting at a base where you've got 740 million people who are looking at, are ripe for market entry, and there's no single market model in the EU. The EU, or the European Union, has not provided any direction or directive in terms of how cannabis should be rolled out domestically in each member state or non-member state, given UK or Switzerland. So it is up to each European country to determine what is the best course of action. Now, each country, and I'm going to go on to, is a little bit different, but what you are seeing is, and why cannabis was legalized in Europe is they are looking at it as a public health initiative rather than a commercial initiative. And the public health initiative actually is a much more favorable approach, because it looks at certainly incentivizing private access more so in the early days. So for private businesses, there is a time in the market where small to medium ventures can enter and build quite a presence within the market before, say, a traditional major pharmaceutical company enters the space, because it is still early stage. It's still early stage growth. There's still I suppose volatility in the market. There is still quite significant risk in the market, so they would prefer to enter cannabis at a later stage through a partner that they feel more confident in. And that's why over the next 2-3 years, I believe there is huge opportunity for businesses who have a strong foothold, presence, and operations in Europe. So look, I have a market study to take you through, and I don't know if this has been sent to you all in advance, but I do know it is certainly available to everybody. So what I want to do is, talk you through kind of what ultimately I want to go through today, and I'm sure I will be told that I've gone over time, etc., etc. But let's worry about that after. So there's four main areas. First is regulatory environment, to give you some context as to what is happening in the market in each of these markets. Now I can go through all of these in a lot more detail, through the Q&A. So if you have questions, please do answer them. I want this to be as positive as it can be. The second is market overview, to give you some idea of what consumption rates look like, what patient access looks like, and where we see the growth coming from. Then the third is supply chain analysis, and this is an industry that's being built from scratch. So the markets that are being developed, it's not like what we saw in very early stage markets like Canada, which had no infrastructure at all. So Canada had to grow, they had to grow the plant, they had to build the clinics, they had to build the distribution, they had to do all of that. Whereas what we're seeing is we're kind of on a kind of, if we were looking at in a web terminology, web 1.0, web 2.0, we're in Europe, we're kind of starting at cannabis 2.0, whereby a lot of the knowledge and the IP has already been created. A lot of, the market has been opened up from a global perspective. So in Europe, Europe is importing cannabis from Australia, from South Africa, from Colombia, from Canada, from Israel, from all over the world, and other markets didn't have the luxury of that. So where the opportunities in the supply chain are evolving as the supply chain or the market becomes a little bit more mature, and that's kind of something to consider, when you consider market entry and where you fit within the future supply chain. And then finally, kind of we look at, all right, why we see obviously the opportunities we see within the partnerships between South Africa. And for those that are interested, there's a whole section on CBD. CBD is certainly one of the largest attractive market at the minute. It's where there is kind of significant traction to be gained, and there's obviously similarities in the early stages of the cultivation, manufacturing, processing, and branding side. So there may be some overlap of those who have interest in doing something along the CBD route. We wanted to kind of to have it included, so you would be able to kind of certainly understand the options behind it. Okay, look, so where we are in Europe at the minute is pretty straightforward to a certain extent, but legislation is very clear on what you can and can't do. There is no gray areas. There are areas of points of frustration, say in Spain, where medical cannabis is legal to grow and export, but patients can't get access legally through their doctors or through the health system service. So, however, in France, you have cannabis is legal, but it's only legal through a trial process, and is not publicly available across the health system. In Germany is Europe's largest is Europe's largest market. It accounts for around 3/4 essentially of all patient count in Europe, and it is kind of growing. It's growing at the second fastest rate in Europe still, despite it being the largest market. Now, what's very interesting about you have markets like Italy, markets like UK, markets like Denmark, markets like Germany, all fully legal, where not easily, but it is readily available. They each have a slightly different approach to how they distribute. So in the UK, it is still not recognized as a credible medicine by the UK regulator, NICE, which is NICE and MHRA, which are kind of the regulatory bodies for approving drugs. So you can't publicly get cannabis. So if you were a patient and you want to get medical cannabis, you have to go private. So you have to pay privately. You have to pay privately for the treatment. You have to pay privately for the medicine. Whereas in Germany, Germany has recognized it as a credible medicine. So it is publicly available, and the costs are reimbursed. And so if you're receiving it privately, the costs are reimbursed through your insurance or publicly available through the health system. And that's kind of why Germany has been so quick to grow. That there is kind of regulatory bodies around Europe in each of the markets that are still answering their own questions on the efficacy, the safety, and the evidence behind medical cannabis. So we expect all of this to change quite dramatically over the next 5 years. Each market is going about this in a slightly different way and in tandem with what their own domestic policy looks like. But the positive thing with Europe is there is a very strong, across the board, there is a very strong social healthcare system where the majority of healthcare or healthcare costs, including drugs from pharmaceuticals expenditure, is reimbursed by the state and covered by the state. Now you have different ways of them doing that. So for instance, in Germany, they reimburse costs for all drugs, whereas in places like Spain, you know, again, a country of 52 million people, they look for kind of more universal ways of applying cost savings. So that is kind of coming up with generic or working directly with manufacturers to supply broad standard where so it doesn't create any level of competition, and they can develop economies of scale when acquiring products and medicines for their domestic market. So all of these are markets in flux. Now you have more conservative markets: Finland, Norway, Sweden, the Baltics, the Balkans, which are still slow to adopt. However, there's been significant progress in the last 18 months in each of these markets. So it is not a question of if, it's more a question of when. You have in Europe, you have and I'll get into the supply chain. So in Europe, every market can import, every market can export. There is no commercial ban like there is in Canada on imports. A lot of markets want to be self-sufficient when it comes to production, but I think that is just, personally, I think that's just noise and there's no real evidence behind it. For instance, in Germany, there are three companies that are growing, but really the volume of cultivation that they're doing will only support around a third of the existing patient demand, and the costs are extremely high. So you have costs like in Portugal, for instance, where you grow. The thing that's obviously important is you've got the same standardization. You've got the same, once it's EU GMP standard and the certificates and analysis and so on are all approved. It's a level playing field in terms of product. But if you take, say, I want to buy product from Portugal. Now I can probably buy product from Portugal for maybe anywhere between €1 to €1.10 a gram for finished product flour, and now that's under EU GMP. If I go to Canada, that's probably going to cost me $1.60. Now there are other markets like Germany, which are new, and the cost is a little bit higher again, or even Denmark, and the cost is a little bit higher again. So there is huge kind of price competition around supply and demand, and kind of how we see cannabis working as a commodity, and how people specialize within the supply chain. So some people are simply focused on cultivation, not focused so much on processing and manufacturing and finished product and branding and distribution and everything else. So the focus on a company to do absolutely everything in cannabis is no longer happening. Of course, there is and we'll get into the pricing along the supply chain. Of course, there is temptation to do everything and to be all singing, so you get the full margin. However, the companies that have tried to do that haven't really succeeded, because you can't be a master at all. So look, all of this information is of course going to be available, but this is kind of our roadmap of how legalization is opening up, how this market is ultimately going to develop, and how we see each country coming on board. So look, I don't know if you can see my little mouse flashing across, but these are the more conservative markets. Now, I was in Madrid last week, and this is pricing CBD. Marking, I'll get on to kind of pricing and pricing metrics, but later. But somewhere like Spain, it's kind of a sleeping giant. So you have this domestic population that have been kind of driven to the black market for the last 20 years and kind of go through things like social clubs to get their products, but ultimately they would like to go to their doctor. So it could be brought in line with the rest of how they're being treated, so they don't have to go behind their doctor's back when it comes to their healthcare. And unfortunately, that's happened in Spain for the last 20 years. And Spain has been really, really slow to open up access, but that has changed quite significantly in terms of now they're just trying to decide on what is the best domestic model for them. You have France, which is obviously undergoing a significant trial. Poland, which is certainly one of the largest markets that we see patient access for. Now, a lot of the early stage elements are kind of looking at the evolution of product within those markets. So for instance, in Poland, you can get flour, and how the flour is processed is magical, but they are looking at other products and other formats, because doctors don't always want to prescribe flour. Doctors like prescribing things like things that represent other medicines that they're used to prescribing: gels, capsules, patches, things that they know how they can recommend regarding dosage. Now, you've got a wave of legislation happening in each of these markets that is, one, trying to determine, all right, what's the best format for our own domestic system, but also two, how does it work from a distribution and patient access perspective? Do we need specialists? Can general practitioners prescribe, or can specialist nurses prescribe? And then how do we track it? How do we ensure that there's efficacy, that we can have full transparency of product across the supply chain, and so on? So they're all doing their own trials, and they're all looking at what is best for themselves individually. There is no single market. There's no single market legislation on it. So look, this is kind of going into oils, because I think oils is where there is a significant opportunity, and kind of where the growth area is within the cannabis space. So look, there's a transition happening between cannabis and cannabis and extract based products, and the reason behind that, of course, is look, there's the extract market is playing catch up to this demand for extracts. So early days, initial patients coming onto the market are, it's kind of blurred lines that they are ex-adult use. So, they are kind of quasi-adult use, quasi-patient, and they've been using flour for however long, and they want to continue using flour, but to doing so in a legal environment. And then you've got the actual patients, the true patients who've never tried cannabis before, have never, have been looking at remedies for their illnesses, and have been recommended and prescribed cannabis and coming into it first time. Now, they don't know anything about, maybe smoking a joint, or or using it in a vaporizer. They don't know the dosage, they don't know the volume, they don't know the frequency. Things like an oil and an extract product is where you've got a more confident medical professional who's going to prescribe it. Now, the issue is Germany and UK are really the only markets where this is possible at the minute. However, that is changing. Italy, Denmark, Netherlands. Sorry, it's the only market. Germany and the UK is the only market where finished products can be distributed. Magistral products, which is where the pharmacist has to go and formulate in the pharmacy, is still available, but that is quite complicated because, one, it eats up the margin of any producer because the pharmacist takes a bigger cut because of their work involved, but also, two, it means that finishing having a branded product on the market becomes watered down by the fact that it'll just be somewhat of a standardized magistral product. But Germany and UK is where finished products are allowed, but more markets are opening up. So Poland, as we mentioned, large flower market opening up to finished product. Ireland, Spain, Germany, Italy, these markets are all opening up. There is, I'm sure everybody is well aware of what GMP and EU GMP is, and the information behind it. Now, we have included a whole bunch of notes and stats on EU GMP, the process behind it. If you are seeking local specialists or consultants, I'm more than happy to recommend people who I trust, who I know have experience and have delivery on it. But really, if you are looking at Europe and you are looking at medical, you need to ensure that there's a base of GMP, and then of course to get to EU GMP. Now, you don't need to do everything along the supply chain to EU GMP standard, and you can work with partners to kind of complete the process. So we see, for instance, we see people manufacturing to or cultivating to EU GACP, which is the agricultural side of the cultivation process. GMP comes to the stage of once the product is cut or dried, how does it manufacture from then? So everything from the trimming all the way through to the curation and the finishings, whether that continues to remain as a flower or as an extracted product. Now, those EU GMP and GDP standards can be worked via a partner if you don't own the whole licenses behind the process. And we see that quite regularly of kind of contract manufacturers coming in to complete a lot of the processing to ensure that companies can get their product to market, even though they don't have all of the accreditation or standardization themselves. They can work and outsource a lot of those processes. So we're already seeing, companies that don't have all of the licenses themselves, but certainly have the early stages of the manufacturing process covered to EU GACP, which is again the agricultural standard, that they then work with the contract manufacturer to complete the production or complete the manufacturing processing side, and then they can jump in again maybe at the distribution side and get more involved in distribution. So there is, or they work with another distributor. So, or they just want to become a contract manufacturer and say, look, we just want to focus on being contract manufacturers of working with all the cultivators and specializing in supporting and transitioning companies from GACP into GMP, and then building for them to them to take it to distributors and so on. We just want to focus on GMP. So I'll go into that in a little bit. Look, there's basically all of these, all of these elements in terms of you won't be able to move products in Europe without this standardization. You won't really, if you even talk to distributors who try and sell your product and be like, oh, we plan on being GMP ready in 2 years or 3 years, a lot of them won't talk to you. There is a lot of companies who've tried to go for GMP standardization and have failed because it's difficult. It is really, really difficult. There is still, I suppose there's probably like 12 or 13 facilities around the world, maybe more now, but not that many. That are compliant of hundreds and 100+ facilities. There's only a handful that are EU GMP compliant and who can do the full production. Now, all the documentation and how it works can be found in the doc. So please do follow up with that. And this is when you want to talk to GMP, I can talk a little bit about it for sure, but I would implore you to seek a specialist in this area. It is the best money that can be spent. Right. So look, we've conducted a lot of studying and analysis on where we see the market going and how we ultimately see Europe shaping up from a distribution perspective. Now, the first, so I think we've covered six core markets, and these are kind of the markets where there is the immediate and short-term opportunities in, because there is existing legislation, there is existing patient access, and there is a pretty decent kind of point of entry where there is still opportunities that exist. So look, the first is Germany. Germany will continue to be the flagship. It's free market, which means getting product into the market is pretty straightforward insofar as once you have the standardization, which is of course incredibly difficult. Once you have the standardization and your product fits standardization, then you'll be able to get it in. But there are numerous importers who have licenses that can receive products. So the way it is registered and listed as a pharmaceutical in Germany means you have numerous importing options. Now, the challenge is the distribution side of things, because it's restricted from a telemedicine's perspective, because you can't go, and distributors don't own a chain of pharmacies. There's you can't own more than 3 pharmacies in Germany. How it is distributed is quite difficult. So a lot of the power in the supply chain in Germany lies with the distributors. So those who can ensure that it reaches a number of pharmacies. But there are kind of growing distributors and importers on a weekly basis in Germany. So it is a market where there is still huge competition for. Patients are constantly evaluating their needs. Pharmacists and supply chain is constantly looking at ways of increasing their margin, and you have the focus moving more and more towards finished product, which means it is less reliant on the pharmacist and pharmacy and more focused on the actual finished product. The UK is not the second biggest market, but certainly the fastest growing market in the UK, in Europe. So again, it operates as a private market. What that means is you have to be referred by your general practitioner, and as your general practitioner has to refer you to a specialist. A specialist then, you know, a specialist consultant can then give you a prescription which you ultimately need to fulfill. Now, the positives in the UK is, if you are a private company, you can not only import the cannabis, you can also distribute it, and you can also distribute it to your own pharmacy. So you can own the full supply chain. So for example, Life Group, Life owns the distributor, it owns the importer, it owns the distributor, it owns the telemedicine / pharmacy, and it owns the clinics where the doctors and specialists actually prescribe. So the minute you go in and enter their system, everything within that supply chain, they are going to cater for you. So from a manufacturing or sales perspective, it's obviously a lot more exciting, because there's a clearer path to the patient last mile, and owning the prescription, which is obviously within the medical sense the holy grail, because one, it gives you an understanding of the evolution of the patient, and then you can customize products as the patient evolves. Like, there is no, as the patient gets older or responds differently to different products, that information can be passed across the supply chain. So next, for either next batch or next format or next iteration or next variation, the doctors can be a little bit more informed as to what is going to become available, and so what they can prescribe. Because when we're still early in the industry, where patients are telling doctors what they want. They're telling doctors, okay, I want a high THC, I want, Gorilla Glue, I want X, Y, and Z, because I know it's available. Now, doctors are being now more informed, and they're being guided by the distributors and the importers as to what's actually happening. Europe is Ireland's Europe's leading and oldest market, and it is what I would say is a sleeping giant. So Europe, when they first adopted it, they decided to take quite a conservative approach, and they requested that the military ultimately manage the cannabis program domestically. So the military, unaware of what else was out there, they decided to go about cultivation. So the military actually grow, manufacture, and supply their own domestic market. Now they do accept imports, but those imports are heavily taxed and tariffed. So, those costs are passed on to patients. So what that meant is doctors really weren't given a formal education, because the supply chain into that market was really restricted. So, for companies to go and educate doctors, it wasn't worth their while, because they were only ever going to be able to import a certain batch of or certain volume. So, they'd never be able to make their return. And then from a military perspective, well, they didn't want cannabis to get too big, because they didn't have the bandwidth, or certainly didn't want to have the bandwidth to deal and manage with that. So you have quite a condensed base of doctors and specialists and patients in that market. But that is all changing. Like, there's why places like Germany and the UK have kind of blossomed in recent years. Italy hasn't, because their legislation regulation isn't that straightforward, and isn't that easy to regulate. It is very much based on each of the regions, and each of the regions has their own legislation regarding things like telemedicines, regarding pricing, regarding reimbursement, and you have to have very strong local knowledge in order to work around that. But then the last kind of 2 years, or certainly the last 12 months, we've seen significant inward investment of private companies looking to open up Europe and open up that access. So look, at the minute, on just, I suppose it's probably around 42,000 patients in Italy at the minute, where we're kind of expecting that to rise. France is halfway through their own 2-year program where they're trialing medical cannabis. So trialing everything from points of distribution, product availability, doctor education, patient response and feedback and efficacy. That will complete almost towards the end of next year, or kind of middle of next year, where we'll see the opening of hopefully a full-blown program. But what I always expect with these trial programs is by the time they take it back and then go to study it, there's so much kind of time added on that they usually extend the trial to give themselves some room to come up with a full-blown response. So that 2-year trial can just as easily become a 3-year trial, and I suppose expected to do so. Switzerland is one of the first to adopt. Was one of the first to adopt cannabis. There's a high, just like France, there's a high natural prevalence rate within Switzerland for cannabis and cannabis consumption. It is also the first, or one of the first markets in Europe this year that is going to go rec, so going to go adult use. So you will see a divergence on the traditional medical cannabis users. There may be some sort of dilution as they migrate to full-blown adult use, and which means kind of there is a broadening focus of kind of more medical demand, as cannabis becomes more widely available, recognized, and the better brand awareness within that market. So we see it in legal markets where adult use comes on stream. There is an early stage dilution from traditional or early stage medical cannabis adopters who were kind of quasi adult use, but it's then being replaced by a new category of medical cannabis users who are brand new to the category and never used cannabis before. Poland's just number wise and population wise, Poland remains a dark horse in cannabis. The rationale why is it's been difficult to get products into the market. The number of companies that can actually register for import is quite restricted, so you only have a few players that are actually importing, and finding those players can be quite difficult, and building relationships with those players can be difficult. So which is why some companies, once they announce that they can actually import, they get bought by a cannabis company. So so it shuts off access for everybody else. And then secondly, why there isn't huge interest for companies to spend all this money on getting an import license for cannabis is there are still restricted numbers on patients. So where and how they can distribute, and the volume in which doctors can prescribe for, and how they can prescribe and what they can prescribe is still a little bit restricted. Now these are all growing pains of any industry, but you will definitely get more so here. Look, we're seeing kind of a compound growth rate of around 46% year on year. Yesterday or before, I kind of talked of cannabis has for the last 10 years been a bull market. In when you try to explain this to investors outside of cannabis, they find it hard to get their head around. But cannabis has been a bull market for the last 10 years in North America. It will continue to be a bull market in North America for the next 10 years. We're really just getting started in terms of traction of volume of sales and services. Now, this is what we forecast for the next 5 years, and it is, or the next 3 years, but it is a forecast where we see extracts start taking over in terms of where the demand is going to come from. Now, that demand is going to come from because patients, patients who were using flower traditionally move over once adult sales opens up, and doctors will kind of start focusing more so on the extraction availability of what products are out there. You can also see with this, and look, all of this is going to be much easier to see when it's directly on your screen in a much more easier fashion. But you have Germany continuing to lead the way, quickly followed by the UK, Italy, and then France, once it comes on stream, is going to dominate quite a large portion of it. Now we don't have Spain included there because they still don't have regulation, and I would say it'll probably be another year before they actually have the program opened up. Now they're on the cusp of saying this is how it's going to happen, but the minute they say once it's going to happen to implementation takes anywhere to a year. But is why you need to plan for when you want to enter a particular market, because you could be first in that market without any competition. The market could be slow, but you try and enter Germany today. Every single cannabis company who can export in the world wants to enter Germany. Competition is incredibly intense. Yes, there is a market, but no company is dominating Germany. There's far too much competition for that to happen. However, there's opportunities in early stage markets where you get better position, where you have a better local partners, and you can certainly have a USP. So where we see the growth ultimately coming from is Germany. Germany outshines it. So of course every cannabis company wants to come. Why wouldn't they? But if you look at, say, countries like Poland, the UK, even Switzerland, Czech Republic, these are markets that aren't that well serviced to date. There is not a huge amount there, so they often get overlooked by manufacturers, and it still has pretty healthy growth. Now this is only forecast to 2025, so this isn't. We don't see any slowdown in patient growth. Certainly, as more evidence comes out, as kind of patients become more accepting to trial cannabis, and as more doctors come on board to prescribe, and it becomes available on the national health system and so on. So currently in the UK government is just like the French government, they're doing trials to adopt it into their health system. If that's adopted into the health system, well then our forecasts are woefully wrong, because you would, that 46% compound growth goes to 120% plus compound growth realistically if it's adopted by national healthcare systems. But from working with the healthcare systems for the last 3-4 years, nothing happens overnight, especially not with cannabis. So we're biding our time. We're optimistic, but we're biding our time. I think there was a question of like, all right, where does the money go? Where does the product kind of end up, and who gets the margin? So this is looking at all the stages across the supply chain. So you have from cultivator through to taxes, looking at a 10 milligram or 10 milliliter kind of bottle of extract. So the patient pays 130. Who ultimately gets the money? Well, the cultivator, depending on product and depending on the final cost, the cultivator and the producer And so we've got a distributor here because there may be additional steps involved, but depending on how many parts of the supply chain you own or certainly have good relationships with, there is at the minute kind of the producer and the distributor do quite well out of it. The pharmacy does exceptionally well, but that's because you've got, it's more magistral based, or certainly they're more hands-on. That will come down as kind of routes to access or patient access becomes more widely available, and patients have greater access and greater points of availability where they don't need to use the same pharmacist, and there isn't an over reliance on the pharmacist. So look, there's a couple of things that we have here in relation to what we're ultimately doing here. So look, licensing, obviously, ensuring that everything is all above board. Having strong points of contact in the market is key. Being aware of who the key players are. It's still a very early stage industry, so human relationships do matter. Competition, yeah, look, it's early stage. There isn't a huge addressable market yet, so there is a lot of competition within the space. So having an additional add-on beyond just a product or a service, having something beyond that is going to be really, really, really invaluable and provides that cut through. And then, of course, from a margin perspective, being able to offer something that is sustainable is also really important. Not just gets you in the door, but is sustainable is going to be key, because if you can these are all, I think the market it's early stage, but it's maturing to a certain point where companies are looking at supply, or they're looking at contracts no longer from a year or 18 months perspective, but looking at 3 years, 4 years, and planning around that. We see distribution as a large add-on. So where companies can ultimately add on is quite exciting. You have cannabis kind of going in a way that if you can own, and let me go back, if you can own this margin here, this is this, or have some involvement in this margin here, it adds up quite quickly to the cost of, there isn't the same cost of production or cost of sale compared to cultivator and producer facing. So distribution is still a very profitable side of the industry, and certainly one which will continue to have greater influence around it. So look, we've got loads of stats and information on so I'm not going to go too much into it because I kind of want to talk a little bit about the CBD, but look, we've got lots of opportunities within South Africa. We've already seen a number of companies entering Europe. How they're entering Europe is a little bit different, and the services that they offer now. What I don't want to do is just focus on and talk about South Africa is only good for cultivation and manufacturing and production. That's absolute nonsense. There is technology, there are product development, there are innovation around kind of custom and bespoke medicines, which are really, really exciting. Personalized medicines. Cannabis presents one of the first amazing opportunities to develop personalized medicine. So there's new initiatives and innovations that can be developed in South Africa that can be applicable to Europe. Simply supplying a finished product is obviously quite difficult because you're dealing kind of in a pharmaceutical environment, but there is innovation happening within cannabis that I think if you're looking at entering the market, you have to think about how is my offering better than those in other, one of the things obviously going for South Africa is maybe kind of low cost part of the supply chain. But you're also competing with Portugal, you're competing with you're competing with Portugal, you're competing with Colombia, you're competing with other kind of low cost jurisdiction. That USP as a selling point is being diluted. So how we ultimately evolve that does need to change. Now, there's lots of information on the regulatory process and how you go about getting licenses and how you want to get licenses and how you become registered. All of that is available in here. But from my understanding, my experience, and my knowledge is the regulators have become an awful lot more receptive. They are certainly looking at it as a job creation, smart economies, business development, international business development, foreign direct investment. They're looking at all the opportunities that exist in it, and have certainly started to support, like we're seeing today, starting to support domestic companies entering cannabis. There's of course an expectation that we will see quite an innovative domestic market that looks after domestic patients, not just in South Africa but across Africa. But obviously the theme of today is looking at South African companies and initiatives entering the European market space. So look, there is already exports happening. There is already products moving into Europe, moving into Africa, moving into Canada. You have Lesotho, which has been somewhat at the forefront of regulatory change when it comes to encouraging domestic cultivation. So there is a very active market or environment in Lesotho, but that is very heavily reliant on working with South Africa as well. So one is a land bridge, but also two, for the additional skill set that is more widely available in South Africa. And that's something we haven't talked much about, but we certainly can. And all this information is available to you. So look, there's when I talk of like business models of, it's not just finishing final products. There's other ideas, be it contract manufacturing, API manufacturers, propagation of analytical services, personalized medicines, focusing on the extractional side of things. So there is a really exciting time that is happening, because you can take all of the learnings of what companies are doing around the world that are that have been in the Cannabis 1.0 and say, okay, now that we know how to grow and manufacture to a standard, where is the industry going, and what's our role within it? So look, none of this happens overnight, and while the forecast we're only to 2025, I could do to 2030 or 2035, but that crystal ball would be there would be, I wouldn't be able to stand behind us trying to second guess what regulators are going to do or how the market is going to ultimately evolve can be quite costly. And this is why companies need to be heavily involved in understanding what's happening in the space, heavily bought into the industry regarding the network and everything else. So look, there's lots of information here regarding partnerships, what companies are doing well within the sector. I'll leave all of this kind of to you, where there's a lot more conversations to be had. And then regarding the CBD market, we've tried to kind of provide a condensed analysis. Now, I'm not going to go into CBD that much now. So, look, I think there was a question around what's pricing of CBD. Look, prices of CBD have gone down significantly because the barriers to entry to cultivation, manufacturing, distribution aren't as high as medical. And one of the areas of why medical still remains really interesting is because it's essentially pharma. You're playing in the pharmaceutical area. So look, there's loads and 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 loads, and this kind of gives you. This is actually really good. This is a hell of a lot of information, a hell of a lot of work, but this gives you all the pricing, Mark, again, gives you all the pricing across the markets. And so what products are, what markets are, what companies and brands are charging across price point, across market, which gives you an understanding in terms of the evolution of pricing within CBD. So I presume I've gone completely over time. Apologies. But yeah, look, I'll leave that with you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy, and big apologies for having the rush on. I know the content of this report is just magical in terms of its knowledge sharing, and as well as for the producers as well. And I think, we would be here for a very long time if we were to really cover the fine details. But I think, the key concepts from the first couple sections were definitely well received. And this will be disseminated to all of the participants of this call, and hopefully we can get a few questions on that Q&A that you can maybe address a bit later. And then, of course, obviously, with our relationship, we can always just continue. If any further questions roll out, then we can just address that and connect accordingly on there. But Mr. Murphy, thank you very much. This was very important, and we're very happy to have this research report. Really well done. And just thank you very much. From here, just in terms of the program, I have given Mr. Murphy a few additional time, but from here, I just want to move straight over to Ms. Erica Joubert, our head of the export unit, and she will just give a very brief presentation on the Wesgro export unit response, especially on the tail end of what Mr. Murphy's just spoken about, and then we can take it from there to the panel discussion thereafter. So after you, Erica. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Can you just confirm that you can see my presentation?
Indeed, I can.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Stephen, it was really amazing. And I'm looking forward to dig into the report myself. And as Josh said, we'll share the report with the Western Cape businesses also. And to Angel and the rest of the EU delegation, thank you very much for the collaboration on putting the report together and helping all of us better understand how do we support medicinal cannabis and the cannabis export space going forward. As indicated, my name is Erica Joubert. I'm the head of exports at Wesgro. Thank you to everybody for joining today. And for the next few minutes, I'll do a quick overview on Wesgro's export support services to Western Cape business. I'll do it in general, what we do, and then I'll be touching upon efforts to support cannabis specifically. A quick overview, the unit is responsible to support Western Cape business with exports of goods and services across the globe. And additionally, the team has a second and equally important mandate, and that is to facilitate the expansion of Western Cape companies into the rest of Africa through our outward foreign direct investment program. More specifically, some of the key services, export training and mentoring, really to build the export ecosystem through our export advancement program. We support with trade research and intelligence, such as the decision support model, which helps exporters understand which markets hold the biggest export opportunity for their particular product. And then also really important is as access to strategic networks and networking opportunities, including export councils or embassies, consulates, chamber of commerce, industry associations, both locally as well as internationally. Again, for us to expand that and build that exporter ecosystem to help provide information and then to connect Western Cape business with international markets. A big component of what we're doing is, of course, our export promotion services. At the moment, we average about 40 to 50 exports and OFDI missions per year, again, to help connect exporters to importers. And then our newest offering is the Cape Trade Portal, which is really where we digitize our export support offering to be able to extend the reach and appeal of what we're able to do today. I'll touch on that in a little bit later. Maybe kind of looking more towards cannabis. So nationally, the introduction of the licensing framework for the cultivation and manufacturing of medicinal cannabis really opened up investment opportunities in South Africa. So the Western Cape in particular has attracted significant investor interest and is positioning itself as a quality producer based on the province's strength in agriculture and also its strong health ecosystem. So from an agricultural perspective, the Western Cape is really South Africa's powerhouse in terms of agricultural exports, worth 86.9 billion rand of agriculture and agri-processing goods exported in 2021. 7 of the Western Cape's top 10 exported products hail from the agri sector. It's led by citrus, followed by our wines. And last year, the province accounted for 55% of South Africa's agricultural exports, with Europe the largest destination, equaling 27.2 billion rand. Maybe to touch on, as we know, medical cannabis has to be cultivated in laboratory-like conditions and therefore require extensive greenhouse environments and pesticide-free soil. And in recent years, there's been a large-scale expansion of greenhouses in the Western Cape, in particular, to cater for our agri-space, a demand in crops such as blueberries and tomatoes and so forth. And we saw an intense greenhouse agricultural increase, 43% between 2013 and 2017, really ensuring the skills and expertise are in the province to take advantage of the growing cannabis industry. Really important from a health ecosystem and an innovation perspective, which is strong components for a healthy medical cannabis environment. Cape Town is fast becoming Africa's leader in pharmaceutical research and development, as well as health and biotech, supported by the province's 4 world-class universities, 2 academic hospitals. The South African Medical Research Council is hosted here in the province, Center for Proteomic and Genomic Research, as well as the International Center for Genetics, Engineering, and Biotechnology. And I'm highlighting this really just to make sure, or just to kind of to drive home, it's really making the province a hub for skills and innovation, setting us up for success. As it relates to Wesgro support for medicinal cannabis exports, I think we're also learning. This is fairly new export industry and export environment. We're learning together with industry how to best support the space. And we do understand that it will look a little bit different to the normal goods, such as our citrus and our wines, which I touched on earlier, given regulations and specific export and import licenses that's required. Although this is not classified as a priority product in the Wesgro export support focus yet, we do recognize the potential economic impact and job creation the space offers. I know Stephen had a nice slide in terms of both economic value as well as job creation in the province, and therefore we continue to keep tabs on it. And as a team, we reviewed and we believe at this point, the best support we can provide is providing information and then building an international network to help connect Western Cape cannabis exporters with our international markets. To that extent, since 2019, we published a medicinal cannabis fact sheet, which can be accessed on Wesgro's website, in addition to hosting and participating in workshops and networking events, and roundtable discussions and webinars like we're doing today. Through relationships with our foreign embassies and economic representatives, the Wesgro Export Unit, we've begun building relationships with cannabis associations and industry associations to, again, help learn and also help build that network to support international market access. We're collaborating with the EU delegation to South Africa, who funded the study presented by Stephen a little bit earlier. And again, to learn about EU medicinal cannabis market and how to support exports to the continent. Also through the support of the EU delegation, Wesgro, together with TIKZN as well as ECDC, will attend the Cannabis Europa conference at the end of June. Same, it's kind of linking that network, strengthening the international networks to better support Western Cape exporters. And then key for us, for cannabis, but also all of our other products, is we've launched the Cape Trade Portal in February 2022, a couple of months ago. It can be accessed through www.capetradeportal.com. And the Cape Trade Portal hosts a virtual marketplace to connect Western Cape exporters to international buyers 24/7. And additionally, it also acts as a resource center to provide insights, tools, data, intelligence to exporters to support them on their export journey. To support the portal, we've also launched the Made in the Cape marketing campaign, really which positions Western Cape, South Africa as a sought-after source market for quality goods and services to the international community, and at the same time also to help drive international buyers to the portal. At the moment, the portal hosts 603 exporters, close to 2,400 products, and we saw close to 140,000 hits to the site, most of them international, linked to our UK marketing campaign. And as I said, it will be a key tool for Wesgro's export unit to promote and support exports in general, including cannabis. And then, yeah, with that, I will, just before I hand over to the panel, I'm actually going to stop sharing, or I am going to, and I just want to quickly do a live demo to the site. Josh, can you see the?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So again, there's a marketplace connecting buyers and sellers. So using your HS code, you can search for products here. You can search for certain categories. Not going to go through each of the details, or you can just simply hit find a supplier. You will see that at the moment we have 2,000, close to 2,400 products. There's a series of filters that you can use on the left-hand side. You can also expand your viewing grid here. And just because Stephen ended with CBD, I'm going to type in CBD to see what we come up with. And you'll see there are several CBD products. If I use this particular product, and then from a buyer's perspective, we're trying to consolidate what is it that the buyer would want to see. Product, HS code, certifications, accreditation, other products by this provider, and then of course company information, basic details around the company, as well as basic export experience around this particular company. Really key as well is, and again, the export unit will be using this wherever we go. When Josh goes to the conference at the end of June, he'll be taking the Cape Trade portal with, and through that, also all the companies that's on the portal. Should there be a buyer looking for a specific product or a specific producer leveraging a specific certification, you'll be able to leverage the portal to help connect that buyer to the Western Cape seller. All of the trade leads that we will receive going forward will be managed through the portal. In order for you to be able to see the trade leads, you will need to be registered on the portal. And then how it will work is when we go into market, or when we speak to buyers, or when we speak to our embassies, or to the DTI, and we receive a trade lead, it will be posted here. Once it's posted, if it's linked to your particular category, then you will receive an email alert. There is a trade lead for wine, or for whatever the product is that you'll be looking for into this market, and then you can contact the buyer directly, or the Wesgro colleague will then manage the trade lead on behalf of the buyer. Maybe just touching on the resource center itself. Again, pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through each of the options, but here you can access the 40 to 50 export missions I talked around earlier. All information around our export training. If you're struggling with non-tariff barriers, you are linked up to our virtual export one-stop shop, where you can get access to regulatory, national, provincial entities such as SARS, etc. And then also regulatory and compliance requirements. Most of you should probably be using these tools already. If you don't, get in touch with us. We'll show you how to use them, but leveraging these tools to understand, if I want to export X product from South Africa into Germany, what is the certification requirements? What's the labeling requirements? What's the tariff agreements? What is the is it under an EPA? Is there preferential access? So there's quite a lot of information available, and hopefully through us using and building the Cape Trade portal, we're not able to really, we're not only able to help exporters connect with buyers in a much more efficient and easier and quicker way, we're also providing tools and expertise to exporters to help navigate through the export journey, which can be quite tricky. With that, thank you, Josh. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I really appreciate your presentation. Just to head straight to our next item, which is our Q&A and panel. I see Mr. Giza, Mr. Bear have their cameras on, so maybe just for Ms. Bosman and Ms. Mandi Swanepoel just to also put their camera on, and Mr. Murphy as well. and we can just address some direct questions and also introduction to Mr. Gieser from Biodelta too. So Ms. Karen Bosman, our strategic advisor at Wesgro, will be our host for the panel discussion, and I'm going to be handing that over straight to you. My camera will be off, but shout if you need anything. Thank you. And also just we've got a few questions in the Q&A if you want to utilize that as all for material. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh, for guiding us through this so deftly. Hello, everybody. My name is Karen Bosman. I am, as Josh has said, I'm at Wesgro, and we are challenged for time, but we are going to try and get a little bit of a discussion going. So I'm going to start with Leon Gieser, who is the CEO of Biodelta. Biodelta is a contract manufacturer of private label health supplements to pharmacy and FMCG retailers. And Leon, I'm going to sort of combine two questions and ask us to give us a brief overview of your journey, of your business, of how you ended up in the cannabis space, and then just to follow that with why, where you are at right now, this type of information is so important for your business.
Thank you.
If it is or not.
Thanks, Gar. No, I just want to say to Stephen, what an incredible piece of work. We are constantly seeing people making assumptions, taking decisions in this industry based on assumptions. And many times those assumptions prove to be erroneous. And so we go off on all sorts of tangents based on basically guesses about the market. So it's just so valuable. You've grounded so much for me. And yeah, I just want to dive into it after the call. So Biodelta is a contract manufacturer. We manufacture tablets, capsules, powders, teas, and we project manage liquids for the pharmaceutical retail groups that exist in South Africa. We supply 3,000 pharmacies around South Africa. And we've exported branded products to about 20 countries. These are complementary medicine products. So we used to be a spirulina growing facility, which is a blue-green algae. It's quite a high value product. And we were exporting it as finished product to pharmacies and pharmacy groups in Canada, South America, Europe, Asia. This was about 15 years ago. And we then moved into contract manufacturing. We do private label turnkey for pharmacy groups. So if they want to increase a category that they've got of products, they would come to us and our pharmacists and ask us to develop product for them so that they can have private label in a certain category like joint care. And we would provide a turnkey solution, in-house design, printing, packaging, product development, formulation. And we manage basically the stock for them as though it was our brand, but it's under theirs. When the regulations opened up and CBD was exempt, we saw the opportunity and we started to ironically import CBD oil with 0 THC from the United States. And we provided it as private label into various pharmacy groups. We then partnered with Afrigen, which is a local high-tech, incredible company, and developed a nanosomal CBD, which we have exported to the United States. And that's enough for now. Maybe you can ask another question.
Maybe Leon, just about sort of trying to understand the European market and your journey in that very quickly, very briefly.
Yes. So on Friday, I'm going to Europe. I'm going to be looking to set up a company in Europe that would, with the ability to import products and be an aggregate point for South African growers in the European market. And that's our journey. I want to work through the supply chain to understand the needs of each link in the supply chain. And remember, supply chain only makes a sale when the consumer purchases. That's when the whole supply chain actually wins. So we need to figure out from the consumer back through all the links of the supply chain, what is each link's significant need, and how can we as a country satisfy that significant need.
Cool. Thanks, Leon. Stephen, I would like to draw your attention to page 33 of your presentation. And there's a sentence where you speak about, wait, let me preface this with the fact that we are a export promotion agency. And so part of our role on the one hand is, matchmaking. So helping exporters to find buyers in foreign markets, but we also have a promotional role. And as we've sort of been developing the Cape Trade Portal and the Made in the Cape brand story, we've got quite a strong focus on being seen as a sought after source market. We want to be a region of origin that sort of emanates quality and trust in product. And, as you're talking about Germany, where everybody is trying to get into the German market, and if your product is as good as anybody's product from any other country, is there something about product made in South Africa that you have alluded to it in your study here, that does have a sort of a value added connotation?
It depends on what. It depends on what format. Like there's, there is I think because this is a crop, there's a natural, there's a natural branding that's associated with agriculture and South Africa. When you think of climate, when you think of conditions, when you think of any organic good, regardless if it could be cannabis, it could be food, it could be textiles, etc. So it's not, but the perception certainly from a patient or consumer side is of course looking at, is this going to be like in Germany, grown underground in a bunker, even though it's under perfect conditions, controlled environment, etc. There's a perception about, about having this clean, organic environment and where cannabis is grown. Now that's not always the case, but it definitely does. It is a helping selling point, that cuts through to patients. Now, there's still what we haven't reached yet, Karen, is like we haven't reached a point in time where consumers, and I'm talking medical here, so patients are that informed as to they can't go, okay, there is a list of 20 products on the market and I'm going to decide on Tilray because I know, they manufacture in this way and in this. So that level of education and on the product still isn't there. But I do believe, having and being from South Africa is a major, it will come into brands. There will be a brand element behind it, depending on what type of obviously finished product you come to. But it's definitely, there's a compelling value add, I do believe, in having product from South Africa. I think there has been Europe has always favored as favored that and bought into the South African branding and the brand of South Africa. So it's, look, when I say you to use every string in your bow, to enter markets, that would beat that drum for sure.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to ask Mandy to add another string in that bow quickly. And so, Mandy, you are also at Wesgro and you are in the health tech space, biotech, sort of in that industry. And do you, from your point of view, we had a discussion a little bit earlier around what you think some of the attributes are that could be selling points to the quality of and trustworthiness of products from South Africa, or from the Cape in particular, if you are branding?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I think Western Cape has so much to offer in terms of, and Erica touched on it, on our health ecosystem. So because of our location, we are fortunate to have quite a large number of biodiversity found in the Western Cape, which makes us skilled growers as well as skilled extractors. So our knowledge in terms of the sector, as well as pharmaceutical API developments as well, is something that we can add and definitely use as a value add for the destination. So innovation is also one of those key topics within the Western Cape, and looking at our universities and our hospital environment that we have in Cape Town specifically, this definitely has that culture of innovation to always look for new products. We have individual companies in the Western Cape that not only just work with the biodiversity or the raw material in order to create an oil or just standard products. They really look at how do we create specialist products from those common ingredients that is found in the Western Cape. So I think there's so many elements that are added from a health perspective. And because of this rich environment that we have to control, and I think SAPRA is doing it very well, unfortunately, which they have to, we can be assured that the quality of what you're getting from South Africa is going to be crucial. So we have to control it because it's a medicine. And unfortunately, that definitely increases the cost for competition and the whole ecosystem. But I think it's also a feather in the cap to say that you can trust our products because we have to be regulated quite strictly.
Thanks, Mandy. That's actually a very interesting insight there. I just want to make sure that we get to a couple of the audience questions as well. So, Stephen, back to you, man of the hour here. I don't know if you feel like you sufficiently addressed this. So, the one question is, what is the pricing of CBD versus THC? And you mentioned €1 for Portugal. Was that
yeah?
So
You have to look at. Look, you got different CBD and THC. Medical. We kind of have to look at medical. Like medical, the pricing now is around anywhere between kind of €2 to €4 a gram for finished product. That's wholesale. That's wholesale cost. And then there's different margins, throughout it. Now, it used to be 6 to 7 wholesale. That's come down. Now, that won't come down much more below that. But that's the cost wholesale is at the minute, because you've got imports coming from Israel where there is significant oversupply, and they're looking at there is everything that is happening with the supply chain now is kind of there's a roller coaster of supply and demand, like a real roller coaster of supply and demand. So you've got a market that you've got patients that have been crying out for products, and suddenly there's a few suppliers. So the suppliers early days are kind of price gouging to a certain extent. Then the market patient numbers aren't growing because regulation is a little bit restricted. However, there's a lot more suppliers that have come onto the market in the meantime, so prices have dropped down. So until we see the patient numbers increase, you're kind of going to get somewhat of a yo-yo effect regarding pricing. So when people ask me, making accurate assumptions around what's the forecast of the pricing going to be, what is what do patients ultimately want in terms of the variation of product and strain, and what's the best thing to grow, what's the best thing to produce. You can make, I think Leon said, you can make some assumptions, but you have to have some flexibility with how those assumptions are catered for. So I don't see you won't see the pricing hit the floor, because it's a pharmaceutical product, and the margins are going to be somewhat controlled. However, what a big element that will dictate it is if states try to regulate the volume that that can and restrict the volume that can be imported. So for instance, in Germany, they make it in Italy, they make it very hard to import products, but that's changing because patients are like, well, this is affecting us, so you need to change your market to allow for import. Now, if they reverse that in Germany or reverse that in the UK, the market, things can flip quite quickly, but the need for patients, or the need for companies to be highly engaged with what's happening almost on a week on week in cannabis cannot be understated. This is a market that is moving on a kind of on a daily basis, and each country is trying to figure out what's the best route, both protects them and from a healthcare perspective, but also from a commercial perspective. How do we ensure that this is for instance, why would we let someone else grow it when we could grow it ourselves and create the jobs there? But then economically it doesn't make sense, etc. So the question mark around pricing is the pricing has dropped, but we would see a return to kind of higher pricing in the next kind of 12-24 months as supply stabilizes and patient access grows.
Thanks, Stephen. And then there was just a follow-up.
Long answer.
Yes, fine. Is your long answer in reference to, are you talking about CBD or
no, I'm talking
oil,
about
or just
medical,
CBD?
But yeah, like medical can be high THC, high CBD. I'm talking,
okay.
the
Medical
CBD
product.
is kind of over the counter, and that's kind of it requires less standardization. You've seen the global price of that crash significantly. So you've got cannabinoids. However, there's emerging cannabinoids where there's more focus on, from CBN to CBG to THX, where prices, so you can specialize in production of specific crops or cannabinoids, or certainly aspects of manufacturing, different cannabinoids, flavonoids, terpenes, etc. But the mass consumption that has been there for CBD, you now have that consumption stabilized. So there's no more major growth in kind of CBD, over-the-counter CBD, but yet manufacturing and production has continued to grow. So prices have crashed as a result.
Thank you. I'm going to try to fit in one more until this master of ceremony cuts me off. Do you think that certified organic outdoor growing can be accepted in the international market space as long as quality is certified, or will only indoor growing be accepted?
No, we've seen outdoor cultivation work. There's outdoor cultivation in Colombia, outdoor cultivation in, as long as it's cultivated under GACP standards, outdoor cultivation. There's no reason, why it can't. Like poppies are grown outdoor, and poppies fall into the supply chain for so. Yeah, outdoor can, of course, it's harder to have full control over, for sure, but there's a facility in Portugal, an outdoor facility, that once it comes on stream can potentially supply, just the cost and the size is means that they have greater negotiating power, but obviously there's a higher risk involved. But no, I don't see it being restricted, but licensing is different in each country. So I'm not 100% on domestic licensing in South Africa, but I don't think you can cultivate outdoors. I do think I'm pretty sure you have to cultivate indoors. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Don't think I'm wrong. Maybe I am, but I hope so. I hope not. But look, there's an easy way to check out.
Yes. Leon, did you want to maybe come in there? Yeah.
So when we were licensed by SAHPRA, essentially it's a pharmacist arriving and auditing a facility that's run by pharmacists. So there's a bit of background noise. So it's there's no different rules for SAHPRA to say, well, this is a farm, to this is a manufacturing facility. They only have a certain rule set. And our pharmacists were able to engage with their pharmacist and explain that the reason we grow outdoor, we were able to explain why and how we manage the variables and how we can guarantee that we have an excellent crop at the end. And so we have got a license based on an outdoor grow. There were some requirements by SAHPRA, some findings, which we had to adjust. We weren't allowed to use shade net. We needed to cover that with plastic. But the principle of going outdoor, we then ran a trial where we actually ran an indoor versus an outdoor to compare in our licensed site. And the performance of the outdoor was better than the indoor for the 3 months that we ran it. The yields were better and the quality was better. But in the other 3 month sections of the year, when we go into colder environments, the yields would be better indoor. But the quality was equal or better outdoor, which is very exciting if we can get that right, because of the years of experience in growing in the Eastern Cape and Durban and all around Africa, outdoor growing. Yeah.
Thanks, Leon. There you go, Stephen. Okay, I think, Josh, do you want to take over? I think what we can try and do is convince Stephen to help us answer some of those questions via email, and then see if we can convince somebody to do a follow-up.
Yeah, we take
Most certainly.
happy to like everything on Schaefer and so on, the domestic licensing. That's not my cup of tea. There's a hell of a lot more smarter people on this call who can answer those. But anything on Europe, just happy to answer.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, and thank you all panelists as well. Mr. Giza, we really appreciate your insights from a producer and cultivator point of view. Mandy from the health tech point of view, Erica from an export point of view, and of course, Ms. Bosman as our host of this panelist. So thank you very much, truly appreciate it. We are 6 minutes over time. I must apologize. I borrowed 6 minutes of your time just so we could wrap up on a few questions. I am fully acknowledged the questions that have been asked in the Q&A. What I will do is I will just wrap that up, send that through to Mr. Murphy, and I think it'll be great if I can include that in my mailer to all attendees, which includes the presentation and also video once we're done editing. So it will be as soon as readily available. We'll just get that edited and sent through. And I want to close this session off. Thank you very much, everybody. There's one gentleman that did not put his camera on. His name is Mr. Stern. He's located right down below. But again, none of this would have been possible without Mr. Stern. So we really want to thank him from DNA Economics, if I stand corrected. And he has been great at pushing all of this, the research documentation, the Cannabis Europa tour. So we really appreciate your assistance, Mr. Stern. We thank you very much. We will be closing it from here. And yes, I don't think I can say thank you again. I might just, yeah. Bye, everybody.
Excellent.
Everyone,
Thanks, Joshua.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.